The Republican Party is actually great when it comes to deceiving voters with cleverly titled legislation. The so-called Patriot Act stripped away our right to privacy. The American Energy Initiative would have allowed the oil companies to drill anywhere they wanted to on American soil. And their right to work laws actually dismantle worker protections and help keep wages below the national average. But the names sound great. Right to work. It does have a certain ring to it. And that's how they sell it to the public, because the average person doesn't have the time or resources to find out how bad this legislation really is. For more on the damage that's been caused by right to work legislation, let's go to Howard Nations. Howard, the Republicans want to sell us this idea that Americans, we have a right to work. It sounds pretty. I mean, it sounds really great. We do have a right to work, but what they consider a right to work is not necessarily what it means. Tell us what they're trying to do here in America.
You know, as a side note, I wish they had the same concern for the right to vote.
Yeah.
What this is all about, it goes back to the National Labor Relations Act. Under that act, the National Labor Relations Board is supposed to protect the collective bargaining rights of employees, their right to unionize and negotiate the terms of their employment. Pursuant to that, the unions have negotiated wages and benefits, overtime pay, employer-sponsored health insurance and pensions, and very importantly, they negotiated safer workplace rules and termination conditions. Through doing that, the unions set industry standards. They raised the standards of income, and they created the middle class. And the rise and decline of the middle class directly coordinates with the powers of the unions. So today, as unions are being diminished, the middle class is disappearing. Now, the whole thing about the Republicans, one of the things that the unions did when they were formed is they aligned with Democrats. In doing so, they drew the wrath of the Republicans because they have big political wings in the unions, and those wings help Democrats get elected. So this whole right to work law is a continuation of the perpetual battle between Republicans and the unions who support Democrats. That's what it's all about.
Right, and it has actually more to do, this assault on unions that began really in earnest under Ronald Reagan.
Right.
It has more to do with attacking this group that supports Democrat than necessarily any, quarrel that they have with the unions themselves. Now,
Right.
that's how it was back then. Today, it is more, we have to protect corporations, so unions have to go. They're also funding the Democratic Party, so they've got to go, twice as quickly. So today, we have states that are trying to put together this right to work legislation. We've seen it in Wisconsin, where they've destroyed the unions, the public employees unions, almost completely.
Right.
They're trying to get it here in Florida under Rick Scott. What is happening with this right to work legislation? Why do we need to be concerned about this?
Well, here's what happens. No one can be forced to join a union. They can't be forced to pay political contributions, and they can refuse membership. But they're required to pay a fee to cover the cost of workplace bargaining for which they receive benefits. So in 1947, the National Labor Relations Act was amended, and it said that workers cannot be forced to pay that fee, even though they're receiving benefits of union negotiations. So it's kind of a Freeloaders Protection Act. Their costs have to be shared by their co-workers, and the employer and the union cannot negotiate so as to require those members to pay the fee. So it's a free ride. The Right to Work Act is a free ride for employees that don't want to pay their fair share. And you talk about how this is a political football. Scott Walker, Wisconsin governor, passed this right to work law in March after his big, huge battle and his recall. And his whole union busting tactics and success in Wisconsin has now made him a leading Republican candidate for president of the United States. It's just this, so the whole right to work is just another Republican tactic to attack the unions. Their latest thing is the thing called local right to work zones, where cities and county governments are now getting involved, particularly in Kentucky and Illinois. And these are probably illegal. They should be found to be illegal because they violate the National Labor Relations Act. States may enact right-to-work laws, but local governments are not states. The Kentucky Supreme Court held that in 1965, the last time this came up. But right now there's a case pending in Kentucky again, where they're trying to get the county passing these right-to-work zones. The National Labor Relations Board has filed an amicus brief on behalf of the unions agreeing that these are just wrong. And what they're trying to do now is they're trying to get this up to the United States Supreme Court to get a favorable ruling on it while they still have a very Republican-friendly court.
What we know from the places that have enacted these right-to-work laws is that they have the tendency to decrease union membership, sometimes close to about 10% drop in the union membership. And these, as you just explained how they work, they incentivize people to actually drop out of the union, because at that point they no longer have to pay for the union, but they still get all of the benefits. As you pointed out, it's for freeloaders. But it's not necessarily the workers' fault at this point. It really is with the corporations themselves and with the Republican lawmakers, especially when you consider what unions do for American workers. They help to make workplaces safer. They help to raise wages. A great study came out many years ago, roughly 2005, 2006, that explained that the effect of unions on entire communities, not even for, just that business or those workers, will raise wages by as much as 15% for an entire community. They bring the whole standard of living in a certain area up. But, those are facts that the right-to-work people, that corporations, that ALEC, that the Koch brothers, they don't want people to know. They want them to think that unions are simply a tool for the Democratic Party, which is not the case. They want to say that they're a tool to just take away your hard-earned money that you have a right to work for. And that's not the case either. Unions are vital. They are necessary. And the last time we had very strong union membership, guess what? We also had a very strong middle class.
You're absolutely right. And the other side of that coin is the Economic Policy Institute did a survey, and they found that in states that have right-to-work laws, wages are lower, employer-sponsored health insurance coverage is lower, employer-sponsored pensions are lower, and most importantly, workplace safety is lower. Workplace fatalities in the construction industry alone are 34% higher in states with right-to-work laws. And a fascinating statistic that came out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics said that if you live in states with right-to-work laws, you're 50% more likely to die on the job. It's just, that's how dangerous it is.
That's unbelievable. Last week, Mike Papantonio and I, we discussed the fact that OSHA is supposed to be out there keeping workers safe. But they've been so understaffed and underfunded that they only have enough staff members to inspect every company in the United States once every 139 years. So we don't have the government out there that has our back. We don't have these government agencies whose job it is to make sure workers are safe out there fighting for us, because they've been, slashed and burned by the Republican Party. But what we do have in some areas is we still have these unions out there. And that's what they do every day. They go out there and they fight and they say, look, this chemical plant over here, you have numerous safety violations that are putting our members' lives at risk. This needs to be changed if you want these people to continue to show up to work for you. And I still don't understand how anyone out there, how these Republicans have been so successful in selling the idea that the unions are a bad thing.
Well, there's another side to the coin that's a much smaller side. Some of the progressive states, such as California, in 2014 passed legislation that offered a path to unionization for car wash employees, for example, who are traditional wage theft industry. These people work, they get their money stolen from them, they're not represented. The same thing. agricultural workers, one of the most underpaid industries in the world. They have the right to collective bargaining now. They're moving that way in California. State and local employees in half the states have comprehensive collective bargaining laws in place. The right to work laws, on the other hand, reduce wages. They undermine the unions. They weaken their bargaining power. But most importantly, they undermine the unions' political strength. So they hurt the unions. They hurt their power. And when they do that, they hurt the middle class. On the other hand, they make the Koch brothers and the other robber barons very happy.
They absolutely do. Howard, thank you for telling us this story today. And everybody watching, you want strong worker protections, you want pay raises, you want health care, support unions any way you can. Howard, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Farron.